They say every corner of the galaxy has known war. Empires rise, species clash, and fleets burn in the void. Yet through all those centuries of bloodshed, there has always been a rhythm, a certain balance in how conflicts unfolded. The strong prevailed, the weak submitted, and treaties restored order. That was the law of civilizations, until whispers began to spread of a new species. A people from a small blue world orbiting an unremarkable star. To most of the galaxy, their existence at first was a curiosity, hardly worth attention. They were fragile, short-lived, not especially fast nor especially powerful. Their technology lagged behind. By every calculation, they should have been dismissed as insignificant. But rumors do not obey calculation. Rumors persist because they are fed by something undeniable. And the rumors about this species called humans carried weight no one could ignore. Stories leaked into council chambers, battlefield reports passed from commander to commander, always the same: the humans had fought, and where they fought, no rival left unscarred. At first, it was dismissed as exaggeration. Perhaps a primitive world defended itself more fiercely than expected. Perhaps an enemy underestimated them. No one believed the truth could be more than that. But soon, too many battles told the same tale. Too many fleets came back crippled, too many armies returned broken, and too often the humans, though vastly outnumbered, stood victorious or, worse, left battlefields so poisoned by their fury that even their conquerors could not claim them. The galaxy had seen large species before, towering giants bred for strength. It had seen insectoid hives that moved in swarms beyond counting. It had seen reptilian predators whose claws tore armor with ease. Yet none of them instilled the same dread as this relatively frail, short-lived, fragile species. The question became urgent: what makes them so dangerous? Why does every clash with them end in disproportionate bloodshed? Why, when logic says they should perish, do they remain standing, glaring through the smoke, ready for the next fight? Some believed it was desperation. A small world, fearful of extinction, fighting harder than reason demands. Others claimed it was arrogance, a refusal to admit weakness. But those who truly observed knew there was something far deeper. Humanity carried in its marrow an instinct that unnerved even the most hardened warriors: the refusal to accept inevitability. Where other species bowed to overwhelming odds, humans treated them as a challenge. Where others calculated survival, humans calculated victory, or vengeance. To face them was not to face soldiers bound by protocol, or warriors seeking glory. It was to face an animal that had spent its entire history clawing for survival in hostile conditions, on a world that punished weakness with extinction. Their enemies discovered too late that humanity did not learn war from necessity alone, they perfected it. Every wound in their history, every empire risen and fallen on their own soil, every struggle for land, for food, for breath, had forged them. Their wars had never been brief or ceremonial. They were wars of annihilation, of endurance, of sheer refusal to yield. That history whispered through every engagement: these beings had been killing each other since before they built cities. By the time they looked to the stars, war was not something they did. It was what they were. This is why the galaxy whispered. Not because humanity's weapons were the deadliest. Not because their fleets were the largest. It was because even stripped of fleets, even cut off from supplies, even bleeding and broken, a human would keep coming. If they could not win with strength, they would win with cunning. If they could not win with cunning, they would win with spite. And if all else failed, they would make their enemy pay a price so catastrophic that victory itself would taste like defeat. The galaxy had known wars fought for dominance, wars fought for resources, wars fought for pride. But humanity fought with something different, something raw and incomprehensible, an unshakable will that turned every battlefield into a crucible. To kill one human was to invite the wrath of 10 more. To burn their home was to carve their determination into stone. They carried war not as a choice but as a certainty, etched into their very existence. That is why the whispers grew into fear. Because the galaxy realized it was not dealing with another warrior species. It was dealing with something far more terrifying, a species that had never once truly stopped fighting. When scholars of the great empires turned their gaze toward humanity, they began with biology, searching for answers in flesh and bone. They found contradictions that unsettled them. Humans were neither the strongest nor the fastest. Their claws were blunt, their skin fragile, their bodies slow compared to predators of other worlds. And yet hidden within this frailty was something uniquely monstrous. They were built not for brief bursts of violence but for endurance. Their lungs could pull in air for hours of unbroken exertion, where other species collapsed after minutes. Their sweat cooled them so they could run prey to exhaustion across open plains. Their bones, though breakable, knit with astonishing speed. A cracked rib, a broken arm, injuries that left other creatures helpless, were treated by humans as inconveniences. And then there was their pain. Humans endured it with an indifference that shook physicians of alien races. In study after study, it became clear they did not merely survive pain, they weaponized it, pushing past agony to finish what they started. This biology was the foundation, but it was their psychology that made them truly terrifying. Humans did not know when to stop. No signal existed within their minds that whispered, "Enough, this battle is lost." Instead, the more desperate the situation, the sharper their focus became. Alien commanders who had studied them in combat noticed an unnerving pattern. When humans should retreat, they pressed forward. When defeat seemed certain, they adapted, improvised, and clawed for some unthinkable reversal. They did not crumble under hopeless odds. They sharpened into something even deadlier. History revealed why. The archives of their world were not filled with long eras of peace, but with relentless struggle. Unlike many species who unified early, humanity fractured into tribes, nations, and empires, warring endlessly. For land, for resources, for survival, for pride, they fought without pause. Their conflicts were not ceremonial contests, they were total, often to the last fighter. Their cultures glorified those who endured. Heroes in their stories were not flawless conquerors but battered survivors who refused to yield. And though their wars brought destruction, they forged a truth that defined the species. They could never be broken collectively, because each defeat only hardened them. Other species looked upon war as a temporary sickness. Once resolved, they avoided it at all costs, fearing its scars. Humans were different. War was not an aberration, it was their forge, their teacher, their crucible. Even in their times of so-called peace, they trained for conflict. They built games that simulated battle, strategies played out on boards or across glowing screens. Children grew up competing in contests of strength, speed, and wits, unknowingly preparing for futures where those instincts saved them. While other civilizations turned their focus solely to culture, to art, to stability, humans infused war into every fiber of their existence. Their innovation carried the same signature. A human mind could twist anything into a weapon. Stones became spears, iron became blades, fire became a tool for conquest. With each new age, they did not abandon their weapons, they refined them. The bow gave way to gunpowder, gunpowder to machines, machines to nuclear fire. Even when their planet trembled under the shadow of annihilation, they did not shrink from their creation. They stared into the abyss of their own destructive power and chose to master it, to balance on the edge of extinction with the steadiness of a blade dancer. Alien observers found this maddening. Why would a species so fragile risk everything so often? Why would they embrace such violent paths when easier ways existed? The answer revealed itself in their culture. They did not merely endure hardship, they honored it. To fight and to suffer was not shameful, it was noble. To fall and rise again was a badge of identity. Their very languages were thick with phrases about resilience, defiance, and vengeance. To them, pain was proof of life. To give up was to deny humanity itself. And so, when other species measured strength by size, numbers, or weapons, they misunderstood the humans entirely. Strength, to them, was measured in will. And will was something humanity had in limitless supply. It was in their bones from running prey into the dirt. It was in their history of clawing back from the brink of destruction. It was in every story they told, every scar they wore, every oath they swore. This is what the galaxy's scholars eventually concluded, though many admitted it only reluctantly. The humans were not a warrior species by accident. They were warriors because they had no other choice on their brutal world. Every storm, every famine, every enemy, every wound had taught them the same lesson: never stop. And when such a lesson is repeated for thousands of years, it becomes more than habit, it becomes identity. Thus, when humanity rose to the stars, they carried not just ships and weapons. They carried the imprint of their world, a legacy of unbroken defiance. It was not technology that made them dangerous, nor numbers, nor size. It was that they were born in struggle, and to them, struggle was life. To study a human on the battlefield is to encounter a contradiction that unsettles even the most disciplined observer. They are not the strongest nor the most heavily armed. Many fall quickly under fire. And yet the shape of their war is never measured by how many of them die, but by how they fight while dying. To the galaxy's generals, this was the first true horror of humanity. Their battlefields did not follow patterns. A fight against them was not orderly. It was chaos sculpted into a weapon. Other species obey rules of conflict. The disciplined reptilian legions march in formation. The hive swarms move with synchronized precision. Even the most savage predators of the Orion Belt strike predictably, their instincts guiding their actions like a script. But humans reject scripts. They invent. They bend rules until they shatter. In combat, they transform into something wholly unpredictable, and in unpredictability lies terror. One commander once wrote, "A human is not an opponent. A human is a problem. Every second you spend fighting them is another second they spend inventing new ways to kill you." That statement spread like wildfire because it captured a universal truth. Humans make war not only with their weapons, but with their minds. Their creativity turns the battlefield itself into an ally. If the terrain is hostile, they use it. If the terrain is barren, they remake it. If their weapons fail, they forge new ones out of the wreckage. Their adaptability defies every expectation. Put them in a desert, and they learn to become sandstorms. Place them in a jungle, and they vanish into shadows. Drop them into frozen tundra, and they turn the very cold into a weapon, waiting for enemies to weaken before striking. The void of space itself, which should have broken them, became merely another arena. No condition halts them, it only pushes them to evolve faster. And beyond adaptation lies their willingness to sacrifice. Other species hold tightly to life, retreating when odds turn fatal. Humans, however, are known for a grim calculation that unsettles all who face them. They will throw themselves into impossible missions, not recklessly, but with deliberate intent, knowing their own deaths can cripple entire enemy forces. One human pilot ramming a failing ship into an enemy carrier. One soldier holding a line long enough for an evacuation. One wounded fighter detonating an explosive that denies victory to the foe. Each act defies rational logic, and yet in their minds it is rational. They measure worth not only by survival, but by the cost their enemies must pay to take it from them. But perhaps most chilling of all is their psychology under pressure. Where most species crack under fear, humans wield it like fuel. There are stories of them laughing in the face of superior firepower, grinning through blood, taunting enemies who expect cries of despair. They turn terror back upon those who tried to wield it. This unnerves even veteran commanders, because how do you crush an enemy who laughs as you crush them? And then there is the matter of deception. Humans lie in war the way others breathe. They feign retreat, only to ambush. They scatter, only to regroup stronger. They spread false signals, lure fleets into traps, turn surrender into sudden violence. To an alien accustomed to order, this feels dishonorable, even monstrous. But to humans, victory itself is the only honor. They will cheat, deceive, mislead, and misdirect without hesitation, because for them, the battlefield is not a stage for pride. It is a stage for survival. Every culture has its legends of demons and spirits, of hunters that stalk the night. For the galaxy, humanity became that legend. Armies reported being haunted by shadows, fighting enemies who should have fallen but kept rising, enemies who grinned as they died. And soon, the stories were not just about battles lost but about battles never even fought. Entire fleets hesitated at the thought of facing humans, commanders calculating not how to win, but how much it would cost to try. Because to fight a human is not to clash with a single soldier. It is to clash with a mind determined to outthink you, a will determined to outlast you, and a culture that reveres the unbroken spirit more than life itself. Other species prepare for war in times of danger. Humans prepare always. War is woven into their games, their histories, their very imaginations. Even when peace reigns, they dream of conflict. They rehearse it in stories, in simulations, in endless what-if scenarios. So when real war comes, they are already prepared in ways no other race can match. This is why, across the galaxy, the first word to describe humanity is not strength, nor speed, nor technology. It is cunning. They are predators armed with imagination, and when predators imagine, the prey has already lost. To face humanity is not to fight an army. It is to fight the embodiment of chaos itself. I will never forget the first time our fleets met theirs. We had studied their biology, their history, their unpredictable nature, and yet we still believed those traits would not matter against the sheer scale of our strength. We commanded thousands of warships, each armed with weapons that had crushed countless worlds. Our supply lines stretched across half the sector, our soldiers disciplined, our formations flawless. Against such power, what could a young species from a forgotten corner of the galaxy truly do? We thought we were prepared. We were wrong. The first battle seemed almost trivial. Their fleet was smaller, their ships less advanced. We expected their surrender within hours. Yet they did not retreat. They did not falter. Instead, they struck like phantoms, harassing supply convoys, disrupting communication, vanishing into asteroid belts, then reappearing behind our flanks. When we tried to chase them, they split into fragments, scattering like shattered glass, only to regroup later with renewed ferocity. It was not a fleet we faced. It was a storm. I remember the reports that flooded in. Entire convoys vanished without a trace. Outposts reduced to silence. Captains raving that human saboteurs had slipped aboard their ships, disabling reactors and detonating charges from within. We began to realize that their war was not confined to space battles. They struck in the shadows, undermining us before we even drew weapons. Our empire had grown used to straightforward wars, numbers, strength, domination. But humans waged war with imagination sharpened to a blade. And then there was their endurance. In one skirmish, we shattered half their fleet. Logic said they would retreat, regroup, lick their wounds. Instead, they pressed forward. Damaged ships rammed ours at full speed. Crippled vessels were deliberately detonated in the heart of our formations. Pilots, knowing they could not escape, used their final moments to tear holes in our lines. Even in certain death, they fought as if victory still lived within reach. It unsettled my officers, who could not comprehend such madness. To humans, though, it was not madness. It was duty. The ground war was worse. We deployed divisions to their colony, expecting resistance but not the nightmare that followed. Cities burned, yes, but instead of submission we found every ruin turned into a fortress. They fought from alleys, from sewers, from beneath rubble. Civilians, unarmed, untrained, joined the soldiers. They wielded crude explosives, turned machinery into traps, poisoned supplies, and struck at night with knives when our guards expected rest. We thought we had landed to conquer a planet. What we discovered was that we had landed inside a weapon. Every street, every building, every human eye glared at us as though we were prey. We won battles, yes. We broke defenses. We claimed victories on reports sent back to our empire. But each victory felt hollow, because the humans never gave us peace. Even after losing territory, even after their armies fractured, they returned. Always they returned. To kill one was to provoke 10 more. To crush a city was to harden the will of the survivors. For every drop of blood we spilled, the humans repaid it 100-fold. I remember the day my fleet was surrounded, not by superior numbers, but by tactics we had never anticipated. They lured us forward with false signals, tricked us into pursuing a retreating force. When we realized the trap, It was too late. They collapsed upon us from all sides, using ships we had assumed destroyed. My flagship shook with impacts, alarms shrieking, systems failing. And still, amid the chaos, their transmissions came through, not offers of surrender, not pleas for mercy, but laughter. Laughter, as if the slaughter of thousands was nothing but fuel for their determination. It was then that I understood. We were not fighting an enemy bound by reason. We were fighting an enemy bound by defiance, by something unbreakable. Victory was impossible, because victory to them meant annihilation, and they would accept nothing less than dragging us down with them. When the War Council finally ordered withdrawal, there was no shame among us, only relief. We had learned what the whispers meant. We had learned why the galaxy trembled at their name. Humanity was not a warrior species in the way we understood. They were something else. Something worse. They did not fight battles. They waged total war, against empires, against odds, against inevitability itself. And once they decided to resist, the only question was not whether they would survive, but how many of us they would take down first. We withdrew from that war, battered and humiliated, but what we carried home was not merely defeat. It was revelation. For ages, we had measured warrior cultures by the sharpness of their blades, the size of their fleets, the efficiency of their armies. We thought strength was material, quantifiable, predictable. Humanity shattered that illusion. They taught us that the deadliest weapon in war is not the blade, nor the fleet, nor even the bomb. It is will. And in this, they are limitless. I have faced many enemies in my lifetime. I have seen giants whose blows cracked armor with ease. I have seen insected hordes that smothered entire armies under sheer numbers. I have seen predators who could smell fear and carve through steel. Yet none of them haunt my dreams the way humans do. Because humans are not terrifying for what they are terrifying for what they become when cornered. Other species collapse under despair. Humans sharpen into steel. What horrifies me most is that they do not fight merely for survival. If survival were their only goal, we could understand them, perhaps even bargain with them. But humans fight for things invisible yet unshakable, for loyalty to one another, for vengeance, for ideals, for promises whispered on dying breaths. They fight for memories of fallen comrades, for the hope of future generations, for pride that refuses to bow. When survival is stripped away, they will still fight for meaning. That is what makes them unstoppable. We believed our strength could crush their spirit. Instead, their spirit crushed our strength. They taught us that battles are not won by numbers alone. They are won by the refusal to lose, even when losing is inevitable. They will burn their own cities to deny them to an enemy. They will sacrifice themselves with smiles if it ensures their people endure. They will transform pain into rage, rage into strategy, and strategy into victory. And even when they lose, the loss is never final. Humanity has a way of turning defeat into fuel. Knock them down, and they rise with new fury. Break them, and the fragments cut deeper than the whole. Their history is a graveyard of empires that thought themselves invincible, until they discovered that humans never truly stop fighting. They can be beaten in battle, but never in war. For even when you think you have won, they are already planning the next struggle, already sharpening the next blade. This is why, across the galaxy, even the most arrogant empires hesitate when the word, human, is spoken. Because no one who has faced them ever forgets the lesson. The lesson that to make war against humanity is not to contest territory or resources. It is to contest with defiance itself, with a species that does not surrender, that does not yield, that does not break. The price of victory against them is always too high, for it is paid not only in blood, but in the creeping knowledge that victory does not truly exist. There is a saying among their soldiers: "Better to die on your feet than live on your knees." We once laughed at this arrogance. Now we do not laugh. Now we know it for truth. Because humanity does not kneel. They would rather drag the galaxy into fire than bow to chains. And that truth terrifies us more than any weapon they could build. Some say the humans are cursed, forever bound to struggle. I say they are blessed, though the galaxy may not see it that way. Their curse is their blessing, they endure. Where others falter, they persist. Where others seek peace, they prepare for the storm. And when the storm comes, they do not flee from it. They become it. In council chambers across the stars, we are warned to avoid provoking them, to seek treaties, to tread carefully around their worlds. Not out of mercy, but out of fear. Because once awakened, they cannot be contained. They cannot be enslaved. They cannot be erased. Humanity has carved its warning into the void. Fight us, and you will remember us for generations. And so, when future species rise and ask why humanity is feared, why even the mightiest empires tremble before their defiance, I will tell them this: humans are not terrifying because they wage war. They are terrifying because they are war.